is Alec Smecher. Let me just start that again. Welcome, everyone. My name is Alec Smecher, and on behalf of the PKP Development team, we're here to speak about some of the Q1 developments for this year, 3.5, 3.6 of OGS, OMP, and OPS, and a bunch of other things that are going on at the moment. We do have the Q&A tools, I believe, enabled, so if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to add a Q&A, and we'll take care to answer the questions either spoken or else in writing on the Q&A tool. So without further ado, let's begin. I am with SFU, and SFU Burnaby is on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples. We are fortunate to be able to work and play on those lands. On behalf of the dev leads group here, and of course the dev team beyond that, we have a lot of things to get through today, so I'll keep it fairly short. My name is Alec Smecher. I'm the dev lead for infrastructure, but we're also going to have some presentations from, I believe, Jarda and Devika on UI and design, Erik on ORCID. There's a whole bunch of other folks that aren't going to be presenting today that have been very busy the last little while. And of course, the whole dev team's been extremely busy with the upcoming release of OGS, OMP, and OPS 3.5. So lots of work going on, lots to get through. I will jump straight into it. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll start with a quick roadmap update on OGS, OMP, OPS 3.3. Actually, not much to say about that. 3.4 and 3.5 and 3.6 are our big subjects today. I'll begin with an update on the current release process for 3.5. So next slide, please. This is our kind of single-page summary of our dev cycle. And just to situate folks with where we are in that cycle, that release cycle, with OGS, OMP 3.5, sorry, OGS, OMP, and OPS 3.5, we're about to enter what's called the release candidate stage. So essentially, all of the major development tasks have been done, and we're into the feature freeze process, which is where we essentially are just moving into fixing bugs and finishing things up. And then we wrap that all up with a release candidate. And this is the first kind of test package of OGS, OMP, and OPS 3.5 that then has a bunch of internal stuff happening with it. There's two release candidates. One is used for internal testing, and one is used for external testing. But essentially, at the moment that we start making these release candidates, that's where all these parallel processes here start up. So it's quite a busy time for us. And in particular, for the folks who are on this call, what's relevant is the second release candidate, which will come out in a few weeks, basically, which is the subject of community testing. So anybody who wants to participate in community testing of OGS, OMP, OPS 3.5 will be able to use that test package to maybe run an upgrade, maybe test with Postgres, maybe run through a particular workflow that you're curious about. You also get a chance to see some of the new features that are coming out in that software and take a look at what the upgrade process might look like. And also of great importance is the translation updates. So we're about to be in a stage where the translators can begin their work on Weblate to prepare for the 3.5 final release, in that it'll hopefully include as many complete translations of the core languages as possible. There's a lot of documentation stuff that goes on in this process, so we don't yet have comprehensive documentation for this release, but we have some internal documentation. This is called the change orientation, which basically summarizes the new features in a way that's going to prepare our documentation team to do their work. And that'll be available for folks to see as well. And then the major deliverables as the output of that are updated user documentation, but also this release notebook, which I know many of you who've done coding with OGS will have run into. It's kind of a good technical summary of all the changes for folks who are writing plugins, doing modifications, looking to upgrade their systems. It's the one-stop shop you go to find out, with a new version of OGS or OMP or OPS, what do I have to do to get onto this new version? So that's where we are. We're about to enter this release candidate cycle, a very busy time for us and for a number of you as well. So fingers crossed things go well this time. And this will, of course, be an LTS release. So the end deliverable should be a very stable release of OGS and OMP and OPS. Next slide, please. So just to review some of this, the RC1 release date is currently set for February 24th, which is 1 week from today, basically, or from yesterday, I believe. With that, we will also create a stable 350 branch. I know a number of you are working with the software from Git, and you'll be working with that stable 330 or stable 340 branch. This is the moment at which we create a stable 350 branch and diverge the development of 3.5 towards its stable final release as an LTS release from the main branch, which will become version 3.6. So that'll be available in GitHub to start working with. Translation and testing begins in late February, so essentially shortly after this February 24th RC1 date. And we'll be notifying all the translators out there that there's a bunch of new work to get onto there. The initial release of 3.5.0 should be late this quarter, essentially at the very end of this quarter. We're hoping it doesn't slip into the start of the next quarter. This is just a time when we need to incorporate as much opportunity for folks to do their translation work and testing as possible. It'll take as long as it takes, but we're targeting the end of the first quarter. And then the moment that we release 3.5.0 is not the moment that becomes the next LTS. We basically give time for maybe a couple of builds to get out there into the world, just to make sure that it does behave as we expect it to, that folks are receiving it well, that it's not providing any problems on the variety of systems that are out there. Once we feel like we're confident that it's going to be a good, smooth release process and update for all the folks who are looking to work with the next LTS, then we give that LTS stamp onto it. And when the LTS stamp goes onto the release, that begins this year-long process where there's a new LTS, folks can upgrade from the old LTS before we formally deprecate and stop maintenance of the old LTS, which is currently version 3.3. The roadmap link is down there if you want to see what's in it in detail, but I think we've already talked a lot about that. We'll see some demos later on today too in this session. Next slide, please. Perfect. On to OGS, OMP, and OPS 3.6. Next slide. There's just a few things I want to mention that are under development that we're not going to be demonstrating today, but they're essentially complete. One is authors being able to suggest reviewers during the submission process. Another one is customizable reviewer recommendations. You'll note by the very low issue number, that's been outstanding for a very long time, so we're very happy to have that one added. We're doing a lot of work recently on version types and summaries, and this is basically part of being able to add a preprint workflow into OJS following the new NISO journal article versioning standard. So I think we've talked about this on a few different presentations. It's essentially the combination of a necessary feature development for the ORE project. Actually, all of this is very relevant to the ORE project. Everything we do these days is relevant to ORE. But also it's a chance to incorporate the newly drafted and near to being complete, I believe, NISO journal article versioning draft standard, which basically adds a vocabulary for different phases of a submissions publication. That's the author's original version, the version of record, etc. And also adds terminology for versioning around major and minor revisions. It essentially borrows from the semantic versioning toolset, which a number of you in software world will have encountered to distinguish between major and minor modifications to a piece of software, or in this case, to a journal article, and applies that to publication. So you'll see 1.0 for a major development, a major publication, 2.0 for a major revision, 2.1 for a minor revision. We're very happy to see this kind of stuff standardized, and NISO is a great group to do this because, as with many parts of the scholarly communication world, things are changing fairly quickly, and the various developers and vendors and publishers of publishing systems need to come to their own conclusions sometimes on how to do these things as the culture evolves a bit quicker than the standards backing them. And when we have a NISO standard, it means that we can basically all meet the same target and approach things the same way, which becomes a lot easier than for interchange with other systems. So Crossref's able to ingest versioned content with the same terminology. You're able to generate JATS documents, all that sort of thing. I'll jump to the next slide now. And I believe we're segueing into a series of demonstrations. And these are demos that are going to be on 3.5. So this is your preview of upcoming OGS, OMP, OPS 3.5. And I'll pass over to Devika for that.
Thank you so much, Alec. So the first part of my presentation is this amazing feature which we have just recently merged, and a huge shout out to Ghazi and Bojana for making this possible. So I'll quickly jump through the demo for this. So this feature can be accessible, or you can encounter this feature when you are either creating a new submission and adding contributors, or through the publication tab, and when you're filling the contributors metadata. So you can click on edit, and that's when you'll come across this feature. So here here you can enter the full names of the institution, avoiding any acronyms. So let's humor ourselves, and that University of Toronto. And if you can see as you're typing, you can see all your options. And if you want to check like if you're clicking on the right university, you can always click this button and it's going to take you to the ROR page for the university. So after that, once I'm done selecting it, you can see that there's more information available for it, which would basically be the ROR ID. And then you can click on add. And once you click on add, the university gets added to as a part of the affiliation for the contributor. So this is with respect to adding a ROR university. What if we want to add something which is not affiliated with ROR as well? So I can go ahead and type Niagara Institute of Science, and I don't see the college that I am looking for, and I know it is this one, so I will just like click on it, and it's going to allow me to add a non-ROR affiliated university. It's just that I will have to type, like, enter the metadata in the two languages for it. Even if I don't, it's fine. I can like always click on add, and I can click on it and it's going to allow me to change it again, or I can go ahead, either edit the institution name over here, or I can also remove the institution as well. And in this way, you can add as many institutions as you want for author affiliation through this. So this change is coming as a part of 3.5. So yeah, this is the first part of my presentation. And moving on to next is the editor versions and editor integration. This is something which Alec touched upon for 3.6. And we're currently in a phase where we've locked in the designs, and I wanted to show you all some of the changes that we're bringing this way. We're basically introducing this to the editorial workflow to streamline version management and better integrate the new text editor. So the updates that we have made would maintain the existing workflow while adding flexibility for the journal staff to handle article versions efficiently. So one of the major changes you will see is that there will be a send to editor option under the workflow stage, files, and more option, which would allow files to be transferred directly to the text editor in the publication tab. Every new submission will now also automatically generate an unassigned version, ensuring that there is always a functional version to work with, right? Not only the send to editor tab would create like a new version also, but there's also going to be a button that at any point in time during the workflow, you can create a new version. So the editors will have the ability to assign the article stage and revision significance while sending files to the text editor, as well as when they, click on the button, which is create a new version tab, following the best practices that have been outlined in the NISO journal article versioning draft. So I'm just going to be sharing my screen and showing the walkthrough. So just give me a second. There you go. Also, this is my working draft. There could be some glitches, and I really apologize for that. But this is our new submission dashboard. Now, from the new submission dashboard, we see this Comega hydrocolic connectivity has just come in. It's a new submission. I will click on it, and you can now see that there are all the files. This is the new workflow. I click on publication, and now you can see that there's an unassigned version which has automatically been created so that we have like a functional version to always work with. You can see that it will also show the date, month, year of the day the submission came in, and then this unassigned version was created. Now let's think we're following like a prepinned workflow. wherein, we've gone through the submission files and we want to publish the first draft of this article, right? So one of the two ways we can do it is either we can create a new version and assign all the significance to it and then publish. Or if we are sure that, okay, there's no, this is the one that we need to take, we can click on this send to editor. So once we're sending to editor, it's going to ask me to which version would you like to send this file. So either do I want to create a new version, or do I want to select the current unassigned version? So if I create a new version, there are two things that can happen. I can either confirm and a new unassigned version will be created, or I can click on and assign any of the article stages to it. So I can click on author original, and I can also do a significance, which is like a major significance, or I can send it to editor and send it to the new unassigned version. I can also change the name of the unassigned version to any of these versions if I want to. And I can now click on confirm, and you can see that the text was sent to the editor. Now, currently, we don't have the provision all to either download this text if we've made any changes, or send the text back to the submission workflow. Also, the editor that is here is just a placeholder for whichever editor we will go on to select. So as an editor, you can go on to like make your changes, click on save, and then I can always go on title and abstract, and we can click on publish. But the thing is, you can only publish a version which has like an article author stage or like an article stage assigned to it. So currently this is an unassigned version. So even if you were to go on title and abstract and click on schedule for publication, it will prompt you to add like an article text or an article stage to it, along with a major or a minor significance to it. So let's go back to just give me a second. This is where my section breaks. So we can, after this, either go back to the workflow and keep sending the files, right? So if we were not to follow the pre-publication workflow, and if we were just supposed to like go on submission, accept the submission, follow the review round, accept the submission, go on copy editing, send it to production. And right now in production, when we are there, we can either create a new version again, or click on send to editor, where I can create a new version. I can select the article stage. I can select the major reference and confirm, and you can see like a new version has been created. Now, since this is in the production stage, I'm quite confident about like the editor. I'm going to make the text changes. And then I'm going to click on article and abstract, and I can click for schedule for publication. And this article is going to get published under accepted manuscript. The M&M stand for the major and the minor significance number. So if a particular article stage has not been assigned, it's always going to be the major one when it's created first. But after it's been assigned, which is here, like an accepted manuscript is already created, we can have a major and a minor one going forward. So this is our work in progress about versions and editor integration for 3.6. So I will now pass it on to Jarda to walk us through the UI plugin extensibility and dashboard workflow.
And maybe while Jarda is picking that up, I'll just say we had a really good question on the Q&A tool about RORs and what happens when the ROR name is identical. So the example that Alex gave was Minister of Health, which could, of course, be part of many governments. Turns out that the name for the institution does not include any disambiguity information, so it might be good to include the country name or something there for those cases. We'll talk about that internally. It's a very good point, and that's part of why we're doing these presentations, is to gather that kind of really important feedback before the software hits kind of the public.
Hello, everyone. Can you see the slides? Yes, cool. So I hope that we have some plugin developers on the call. This should be hopefully quite fun and exciting updates for you. So let's go into that. One thing, just to maybe give a little bit more context, I will just do the quick recap of things that we mentioned on some previous calls. It kind of gives you context why we are maybe introducing some of these new mechanics, how to extend our UIs. So as a part of the 3.5 version, we did major upgrade from the Vue 2 to Vue 3. And with that, we got the new Vue 3 capabilities, which is the composition API. We decided to fully use that capabilities. It's a little bit of getting used to, but I believe that with recent advances of the AI, it's easier for everyone to actually learn these new things. And it will probably help you with, building your new components if you are not as familiar with that yet. And other things that we decided to use are the Pinia stores for handling the state of these components and new pages that we are building. And I was always saying that the promise of this is better extensibility. So I will have some examples of that today. And another big part of this technical transition, is also moving away from the Smarty templates. And that's like the big difference, because until now, if you wanted to change or inject something to the UI, you probably are familiar with the PHP hooks, where you could inject some HTML to the Smarty template, and that basically, if you find the right hook, you were lucky that there is such hook in the right place, and you were able to inject what you wanted. That's often how the UI was extended in these cases. And all these topics are in detail covered in our storybook. So if you want to learn more about the reasoning why things were done this way, you can check it out there. We did some initial work on already in 3.4, where we just wanted to give plugin developers more power. So because we are building all our new interfaces in the Vue.js, we wanted to give you the same capabilities. So the main thing was really just introducing mechanism where you can build your own Vue component, you can register this component, and then only thing that is missing is kind of being able to display your custom component. Of course, with the 3.4, only way to do that was sneak it into the Smarty template. So you can see on the screen, basically showing the simple code where you can register your component, and then this is snippet of the Smarty template where we are actually using this component, and using the PHP hooks we can attach this template. So this is kind of reminder how it evolved so far. And now I will be talking about how we are pushing this further for 3.5. And you already seen that we have lots of new UIs. We have new dashboard, we have new workflow page. Inside that workflow page, we have lots of new UIs for managing files, reviewers, participants, and all these new components are built with some extensibility in mind. And I can't obviously go through everything, so I picked a particular file manager to explain the principles that we are using there. And the same will apply for all these new ones as well. So on the screen, you can see with the red rectangles, all the areas that you can extend. And the mechanism is, I believe, quite simple. So basically, we are having like these 5 different functions. You can see the names like get top items, got columns, got bottom items, got item actions that are called, and this provides basically a list of the components that should be displayed. And since this is like very like configuration driven approach, you will be able to extend these functions and sneak in whatever you want to any place you want. So on the screenshot, you are seeing that I sneak in a new column with the name Authenticate. That will be useful for our plugin for Authenticate to migrate it to the 3.5 using this new UI. You can see I sneak in custom action to the drop down, which is there for every file. And I could, in similar fashion, sneak in like something to the top items or bottom items. And these functions are very, very simple. There is example of get columns. This is example how it actually looks like in our code base. This function where we are basically just creating the array of the columns, where you can, the important part, the really like powerful part of this is that you can define the component name, which means that you can create your custom component, you can register that custom component, and then you can just reference it by name here. And as a result, you can basically display your custom component in any of these places. And that component can do anything. It can have drop down, it can look anything you want and do anything you want. So this really should give you lots of power. And here in this example, basically just showing how it looks like from the plugin perspective. So first, we are just doing the same thing as before, just registering view component. The functions are to register it are a little bit different in 3.5, but it's very similar. And the new part is on the second part of the screen, which is the extending function. So you can see in here that I'm extending store, like Pinia store. You know, now the Pinia store is becoming helpful. So I'm extending the file manager Pinia store specifically for the submission files. And I'm extending the get columns function, which is the function responsible to give me a list of the columns that I want to display in that component. And the only thing that I'm doing here that I'm inserting this new column, you know, to be second to last, which is very simple JavaScript code just to sneak that component in. And this is what that component I'm sneaking in looks like. It's obviously not doing real things yet. This is really just illustrated. So the percentage is calculated as a file name length, but it shows you that I'm able to use the PKP components from UI library, which helps me to create like very nice consistent UI also from the plugins. You can see that I can use some of the composables that are new in 3.5 to make some of the things easier, like fetching data or localizing the metadata and things like that. And yeah, and here you can imagine really creating anything you want. This is your like place as a like plugin creator. And here, just to give you overview, trying to like indicate, where you can apply these principles, where you can basically sneak in your components, especially like with the workflow page. You have like the primary area, you have secondary area, you have actions area. So you can really create powerful extensions to any, in any place of that screen. You can also like extend the menu itself. So you can like, we currently have like the workflow and the publication, you can create your own. And for that custom navigation, you can again show any components you want. With the Pinia stores, what I wanted to show here is, this is just screenshot from the view extension for Chrome, which basically help you explore, the view components, but also the Pinia stores. So if you install this extension and you open the workflow page, you will see all the stores that are currently registered, and you can also a little bit explore what the data actually have. So in here, I have like the workflow store selected, which is the main store for that workflow page. And I can see that, that contains the submission, that contains the selected publication. So these are data I could also retrieve. And also, I can interact with this Pinia store from the plugin. So if I am in the scenario where I need some additional data from these stores, I'm able to, reference them by the name and get the data. So you can see the examples on this slide. And I also can like trigger actions that are already existing in the system. In this case, it would open the view library. Oh, sorry. It would open like the library with the files if I would trigger this function. So this also gives me like interesting opportunities to, very well integrated with the existing functionality and with existing UI. So where are we currently? What I have been working on at this point was updating the plugin that illustrates all this functionality. So this is the probably most interesting link, in this time. Obviously, intends to build or write, significant portion in the documentation in Storybook, which would like guide you through the process and, introduce all these capabilities. But we are very busy with the release candidate 1, so I haven't got to that yet. But if you are already interested, and if you, for example, created plugin in past, or you are intending to create plugin for 3.5, and this plugin would be affecting some of these new areas like the dashboard, workflow, file manager, something like this, this already should give you very good guidance to actually start working on it and maybe start migrating your plugin. And if you run into the problems, then there is issue, which is already open, which is dedicated for this extensibility functionality, where it's great if you provide, any feedback, ideas, or use cases, because all these, extendable areas needs to be like supported by us. So if there is something that we missed, that's great place to let us know. I listed here like the number of like pages and components that currently which will be supporting these new capabilities. It's quite a long list. On the workflow page, only thing that is missing is the discussion manager, which is still built in the legacy framework that will be coming in 3.6. But other than that, most of that is written now in Vue.js and having these capabilities. In addition, there's, while I was building these new capabilities in 3.5, I also created lots of composables, which in Vue 3 you can think about like packages providing you with some functionality which will help you to build these components like fetching the data, building the URLs, localizing the metadata, opening our site modules, opening dialogues, and things like that. So these are to some degree documented in the storybook, but also we'll be working on the documentation once we have the release candidate 1 out. And now I will just maybe in 2 minutes show you as a teaser some of these examples. So the plugin that I reference on the GitHub gives you these examples. So if you go to the settings and the website, there is example of extending, the page, which is still written with the Smarty template. So this is something I just migrated from 3.4 to 3.5 using the composition API and all the correct syntax for the Vue 3. But it's still relevant because there is still a bunch of places where you need to deal with the Smarty. But it shows you, how you can sneak in, the custom Vue.js components, including like using our like modal capabilities and things like that. So this is interesting, you know, if you have to still deal with it some other page. The new ones that I mentioned can be seen on the workflow page. So here we can see that the new column is the authenticate, showing the percentage. So that's one extension. Then here we have the custom action, which was added. Here, just to illustrate, you know, I'm showing like the file name, I'm showing like the submission name, just to illustrate that you really can get all the data you need, you know, in these plugins, and that really should give you like endless possibilities what you do with it. And if I say yes, now it opens the submission library, which is like showing how you can integrate it with, you know, with some of the actions that the workflow store offers in this case. Not real use case, but just illustration of the capabilities. And the the other option here, which we can see, is the custom menu. So you can build like multiple levels menu here if you need to. If you have some use case, you can add it to the workflow, or you can create your own. And inside that, you can display as many of the components you want. And what's important to know that out of the box, there are like three different areas, like the primary components, the secondary components, and also the actions components. So you can basically, you know, just say, I want to display this in the action in the action area, this in secondary area, and the layout will handle all of that for you. And yeah, I think that's, yeah, the really last example is just to sneak in your custom component inside existing stage. So you can decide, you know, to display table. You can see that you know, the styling looks exactly as the rest of the application, because it's easy to leverage leverage our UI library. And so everything you can see, you can reproduce with the plugin that I linked. Okay, with that, I will pass it to Erik. Erik, are you going to share the screen as well?
Yes, thanks. And hello, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about our new ORCID features and integrations. So as some of you may know, one of the big changes coming with ORCID in OJS 3.5, and this is also true in OPS for now and OMP in the future, but the ORCID plugin features are now part of the core application. So we've completely removed them out of the old plugin, and we've rewritten them for improved usability and better performance. I will share some examples of what this looks like, as well as some of the new features, although for the most part, it's just been better integrating the existing features in the application by using some of our new architecture. And another exciting thing, which there's not really anything to show for this yet, but this does pave the way for more easily implementing future improvements. And I know that various working groups already have some cool ideas of things that we can do that fit nicely with our overall goals for 3.6 as well. So it will be very exciting to see what comes of that in the future. Then I'm going to do a little bit of a demo for you as well. And I'll just highlight some of the kind of key new things that are going on that might relieve some pain points, as well as solve some problems that you may have come across or may not have, as well as integrating with some of our new features. So the first thing that I will show is where you configure your ORCID settings. So previously, all of that was done through the plugin settings, but now it is part of the users and roles tab. So under settings, users and roles is now over here. We can enable it, and these options are more or less the same as they had been previously. We have all the different API options. The city, if you are if you're using review contributions, etc. One other large improvement is previously in a multi-journal installation, if you wanted to set up a site level configuration for ORCID, this is currently on the journal level, you had to do that in the config.inc.php file. So that had to be done on the server and couldn't be done through the UI. Now that lives in administration under site settings. So only shows up if you have more than one journal on your installation, but that can be overridden at a site level as well. And then this will be enforced throughout the journals of the application. So if we set it here, go back to our original journal, check the settings for ORCID, we can now see that we can't disable it on a journal level and that the API type, the client ID, and the client secret are set. And there's some text indicating as such as well. So the second thing I'd like to show is part of the new invitation workflow. So this is now integrated with ORCID as well. And I will just do a short walkthrough of what that ends up looking like. I'll do test user at. This is going to not exist in the system, which we're expecting. And I believe this invitation workflow has been demonstrated a few times, but this is the new invitation workflow. So instead of directly creating a user, this is now how you will go through and invite users to either create accounts for the journal or for existing accounts to add new roles to those accounts. I will move past that fairly quickly because I want to focus on the ORCID aspect of this, but this is coming in 3.5 as well. Next up, it will send off an email, and that email has been sent. And that user goes to their email, they'll get an email saying they have newly assigned roles in this journal. It will have all the information about what they need to do, and they can then accept that invitation, which brings us to the relevant bit here. If you have the ORCID functionality enabled, this will be the first step rather than create your account, which will be verify ORCID, or if the user doesn't want to, or they don't have an ORCID, they can skip the verification. That will open up a little pop-up. Log into ORCID there. And it will move on to the next step. So here, I'll just finish this up. And we see moving on to the next step that the ORCID is indeed here. And continue. Just a final overview of everything. Go ahead and accept. And now going back to the journal, we'll log back in as the site admin. Actually, what we want to do is log in as that user we just set up. And see that we go to their profile, they do indeed have their ORCID there. And some of these functionality has been improved as well. It is also easier to delete and add your ORCID from this profile. This form in particular is still using our legacy stack. So it doesn't have as many bells and whistles, but that still works more or less as you'd expect. What we can now show is the final thing I'd like to show, which is the new component, the view-based component for managing ORCID interactions. So this comes into play when we have a submission. And if you recall, if you've used the ORCID functionality from the plugin in the past, a lot of these interactions do happen in the background, but if you do need to access them directly and say, resend an email to an author, there's now some more feedback for what that looks like. So for example, this is a contributor edit form for a submission. And now down here, this is a new view component that handles sending and updating and displaying ORCID-related information for the authors. So one of the improvements here is we can request ORCID verification. This will send off the email, and it will not only tell you that the email has been sent, but there's now a way to resend the verification email if you haven't heard from the author or if they say they lost an email. It's just a simple button click to resend that email as well. And finally, there's not much to show in terms of how all of this is working, just because the idea behind what I'm about to explain is all behind the scenes. But one of the other big improvements is that items, if you are using the ORCID member API, are sent to ORCID more frequently and automatically. So for example, with reviews previously, the only time that they were sent was when you hit the thank reviewer button. And that is not a feature that everyone has used, and that was the only opportunity to actually send those. So if, say, a reviewer hadn't added their ORCID before they were thanked, there was no way for them to add that contribution to their ORCID profile. So a lot of the improvements have been to add both a manual trigger for those things as well as have these update more frequently, kind of using the same model that we did for DOI updates with registration agencies from 3.4.
And Erik, just to jump in on that point, you had a question from Marianne about being able to resend and correct entries in ORCID. That is something that's now possible, correct?
Yes, in particular with reviews. It's always kind of been possible, but a bit opaque as to how you do that with submissions. But now, anytime the metadata has been updated in OJS, so in practice, what this means is if the metadata is updated, if a new version is published, if something is unpublished and republished, those changes get sent to ORCID as well. And now the same is true for review contributions as well. So anytime that a submission is sent to ORCID, it will also check to see if there are any outstanding or reviews that need to be updated as well. And that's the case whether the reviews are anonymous or open as well.
We also had a question from Kevin, and I think I get this right, but I'll let you maybe correct me if I'm wrong. It's about what happens if the author doesn't verify their ORCID, and does it block publication of the article? I think originally our plan was yes, to have that block publication of the article, but then because it's so frequent in OPS for rapid publication to be prioritized over having everything kind of completed, we backed off of that policy in favor of having author information be presented on published content, but not presented as an ORCID approved kind of stamped author until that happens. So it allows for the workflow not to be held up. But if an author subsequently confirms the ORCID after publication, then that's when the ORCID stamp appears on the table of contents in OJS, for example. Is that correct, Erik?
Yes, that is correct. And there's now the distinction between, and I can't recall when this exact change happened, but there's updated kind of presentation UI guidelines from the ORCID organization as well, to show when an ORCID has been verified or authenticated, whatever your preferred flavor of word for that is, versus unauthenticated or unverified. So if an ORCID is included in OJS, say from before it was verified, it will show up, but it will also indicate that this hasn't been verified by the author or reviewer directly. So there's a bunch of different cases there now, but the short of that is that now OJS, OPS, and OMP have the concept of knowing if it's been verified or not and will display it as such, but there's no publication blocking as aspects of the ORCID functionality.
Perfect. Thanks, Erik. And I know we've gone through a lot of very specific subjects, but you also got a bit of a preview of OJS, OMP, OPS 3.5 in the process. You saw the new navigation tools, the new submission lists, the new GDPR stuff around invitations for user accounts. There's lots and lots in there. And I'd encourage anybody who's curious to take a look at that second release candidate once it's released. Take a look at it, maybe try and upgrade, see what's coming your way. Participate in our community testing. So file issues if you encounter things. Engage with us on Mattermost if you've got access to that. Help us with that community testing process. It's all going to give you a better sense of what's coming in 3.5 and to participate in kind of the acceptance testing part of it. And then it's going to strengthen the 3.6 release as a piece of software. I want to make one last plug here for Metabase and business intelligence. And I've just dropped a link in the chat. This will be included in the presentation when it's published, to a YouTube video that goes over this. Essentially, Metabase is a really nice open source business intelligence tool that allows for you to explore and visualize and report from a database. And if the case is that you're looking to explore your OJS editorial data, your trends around publication, then hooking Metabase into OJS or OPS or OMP is a really powerful way to explore your database without needing to know how a database works, basically. It's very point and click. There is a presentation at this link that sort of demonstrates the potential for this, but we're putting together right now a bit of a group of folks who would like to explore this in a more practical sense from their own editorial users' needs and their own OJS data. So feel free to contact me, and I think there's an email address in this presentation. Maybe there's a transition there that I've missed. But I'll drop in my email address to the chat. If you're interested in participating in exploring Metabase with OJS, please email me, and we'll make sure that we get you into our Mattermost chat, and then from there into the right group to discuss this. I think there's a huge potential here to make reporting on OJS much easier. Until now, it's been necessary to know how to code a plugin or to know how to modify the OJS code to generate reports, or else you're forced to do it externally. And this might be a really nice way to pair an application with OJS to allow for a more integrated exploration without needing to learn all of the ins and outs of OJS coding. Question here, is it possible to join OJS 3.5 testing? Yes, absolutely. Watch the blog posts on the PKP website. When we release that second release candidate, we'll have an invitation to folks to participate. The first release candidate will be open for anybody who wants to use it as well, but we typically find that the first release candidate has a few low-hanging fruit as far as like bugs that go out in it that make it a bit frustrating for folks to test with. So you're welcome to. But the release candidate 2 is the one where we do encourage folks to participate in testing. And then you'll be able to file issues, chat with us, chat with Bo, who's our QA person, generally test whatever's of interest to you. So if you happen to run in a particular kind of environment, if you happen to use, a specific set of plugins, if you happen to run on a Postgres server, areas that that typically have given you kind of pain points in the past are great ways to make sure we have good coverage in our own internal testing. So Patricia's just shared a link to the blog post there. Please join us there. I see Richard is commenting on Postgres. I think we've hauled you into community testing before, Richard, so thank you for that. I'm hoping and expecting that in part due to tightening up our dev environments in adding foreign keys to the database, hiring on a QA person, that's Bo, who's here as well, to do this work. My expectation is that each subsequent release of OJS, OMP, OPS is going to be easier to pick up and use and to upgrade to. And I hope that you find that that is the case. But community testing is the only way for us to make sure that our environments that we test with match the environments of the community. There's too many of you out there in different places to do it all ourselves. So the community testing really does help us. And my last plug and thank you as well is to translators. This is a really important part of this phase in the release process. Anybody who's working in OJS, OMP, OPS in a language other than English, please watch for the call out to translators to jump into Weblate and start working with that to update the translations. That'll help us to make sure that the first release of 3.5.0 is going to have those core languages and that there's fewer impediments to folks out there to upgrade as well. Translation work is all done by volunteers, and we really can't do it without you. I don't know how many languages there are. There's like 50-something languages out there. And that is part of the reason that we see this explosive global uptake of PKP software. It's only thanks to the translation work out there. So thank you so much for your work on that, and please watch for that invitation to join. I think I'll pause there because we're at the end of the agenda, but we may have some more questions. So if folks want to add to the chat or to the Q&A tool, we'll give a minute for them to participate there. We'll do our best to answer those questions live. We will follow up on this, by the way, by posting the slide deck. That'll be the links that folks are asking for. The video part of it, that'll also be posted to YouTube. So you should, I believe, get a notification via the same process you signed up with here with those follow-ups. But also watch for this to go onto YouTube, and then we'll be doing some follow-up on comments there as well. So long story short, feel free to keep participating, but I will pause for a minute for anyone to ask any questions. And let me just, while I've got the chance, I'd like to give credit to a number of different organizations that also made this possible. We had a shout out to TIB on their work with GDPR in one part of it, also on RORs and affiliations. They were they were necessary for that part of work. We've also been working quite a bit with TSV in Finland on metadata quality, multilingual support, that sort of thing. Of course, every time I mention ORE, that's Open Research Europe, that's kind of steering everything we do, and we are doing a lot of that work thanks to funding from the European Commission. The Authenticate plugin was supported by Authenticate and I believe Crossref. We have so many folks working with us on all these things. I'm afraid to start listing them off because I'll forget one or two of them, but it is a huge community endeavor, and it's always, oh, NISO, I'll shout out to NISO again as well. Every time we have a third-party standard to work to, it makes our life much easier. If I've forgotten anybody, please add a comment on the chat. Perfect. I've vamped enough for everyone to get their questions in. Please, again, feel free to keep asking questions on the YouTube channel. We'd love to see you there. And there's a few invitations to contact us on the chat as well. So thank you so much for joining the Q1 Dev Leads presentation. We do these every quarter, so it'll be a few months before we get to the next one. When we do the next one, it'll be post 3.5.0, so we'll be doing, I'm sure, a tour of that and looking forward to the 3.6 dev cycle, which has already begun, but will really be in full swing at that point. Thanks everyone for coming. We'll talk to you again soon. Yeah, so the next Dev Leads webinar is on June 16th. Please drop that onto your calendar.